Hello everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of Paranormal Stories. First up, we have... this one's by Dragon Crystal. Thanks for the heads up. I've mentioned in other posts that I'm spiritually sensitive when I'm near cemeteries and funeral homes and hospitals, and the sorts, and a couple of years ago I had gone on a college field trip to help clear up this area for a small outdoor greenhouse of sorts. My college instructor tells us it will be there for an hour or so and help out with cleaning before heading back to campus. The moment I step onto this plot of land, I felt like my eyes were staring at me from all around, and even started having chills like standing in a freezer, despite it being a 90-degree day as well as a slight dizziness coming over me. I just try to ignore it because I'm on a field trip for college and need to focus on what my instructor along with the worker were saying. After explaining what he expected us to do, our instructor splits us up into two groups. Group 1 to spread out dirt onto the spot where the worker had already finished, while Group 2 scooped up some wood chips into a wheelbarrow. I was in Group 2, and was heading over to where the shovel was at when I suddenly felt like a hand just grabbed the back of my neck like you do when you're stopping a pet from running off. I freeze, and even reached up to touch the back of my neck instinctively, and even turned around to see if someone had jokingly grabbed me. A good way to get punched in the face. Nope, nobody was behind me, because Group 1 was a few feet away doing their assigned task. And the feeling of being watched just became more intense, like something or someone didn't want me there. I tried again to ignore it as best as I could until the dizziness became unbearable, and I went to get some water believing it was just dehydration coming on. It didn't help, and I just went to my instructor to ask if I could take a quick break in the shade across the street. The instructor seemed visibly worried and told me to go have a seat because she told me later that my face was apparently ghostly pale. So I walk out of the area, and immediately I felt perfectly fine again, like the temperature was turned on again. The hand grabbing my neck was gone, not to mention I immediately broke into a sweat from the heat. Even the color returned to my face. I sat there for about 10 minutes before heading back to my group, only for that sudden cold hand to grab my neck again, like I had wronged it for some unknown reason. I endured it until my instructor finally told us that we were done preparing to leave. That's when my classmate says in a cheerful tone, "Hey, fun fact, guys, this plot of land used to hold a funeral home." I glared at him for the rest of the ride back to campus, because no wonder I felt so off there, because dead bodies used to be stored there, and their spirits still linger in the area. I'm not sure if the greenhouse was finished or not, because I don't remember the location, nor do I want to go back and experience that again. Okay, story number 2. This occurred about 10 years ago, and it's still haunting. So, one night it was me, my youngest sister, and a childhood friend from the neighborhood, Chris. I was on the cusp of graduating high school, and we all decided to hang out one night. We had all grown up together and went to the same school, so that night we were celebrating life, graduating, and also school was almost out for the summer. Somewhere Alice Cooper looked up from a puddle of drool. It was pretty late, and my mother would usually sit outside with us just to keep an eye, even though we were still teens yet on the verge of adulthood, but she had turned in early, and we were all in the driveway of her house. So this particular night went on as usual until Chris said, "Look." We thought he was mentioning something in the neighborhood, like some random or silly activity that usually goes on at night, but no, this was different. He said, "Look in the sky." He sounded very serious and panicked. He then pointed when my sister and I finally looked back and saw a black humanoid floating in the sky. It was so creepy. It was still yet floating, just a black figure. A shadowy black figure hovering and floating, no sound. We could barely make out the outline of what we possibly thought it was. We talked about it, and people thought we were tripping or making it up. I would say less than a day or two later, that is when a tragic car accident would occur with our other neighborhood friends we grew up with and someone else. It happened about 2 minutes away from the house on the main road. A lady went into shock and T-boned the driver. The 2 people we knew from the neighborhood passed away on impact, and so did the lady who went into shock under the wheel. Until this day, me and my sister talk about, and even though we are not friends with Chris anymore, we'll still corroborate each other's story on what we had seen that night. Even though we could not make it out, it's still haunting, given the events that took place after. And the thing is, the figure was hovering, floating over the house of one of the people in the neighborhood that passed away in the crash. And they were the driver. It has been over a decade, and I still cannot make sense of it, and it's still haunting. Also, I'm curious to what we've seen. I wish phones were better then, because we could have gotten better footage, but who knows? Someone would probably have said it was fake. Okie dokie. Story number 3. 2 experiences years apart have me wondering if they're connected, by Front Act 4690. Little backstory. I grew up in Massachusetts, but for my senior year of high school I moved to Florida with my grandparents who I grew up with. I've had strange experiences my whole life, but nothing that really stood out until then. Everything else I can just shake off. For context, my mom has always been very spiritual and talked a lot about paranormal things. I wasn't raised by her for long, though. She abandoned me and my siblings when we were younger, so I lived with my grandparents instead. At the time this happened, I was the only sibling living with them in Florida. One night I woke up to what sounded exactly like my grandparents, mainly my grandfather, screaming my name. It was calling for me to, come over or something, and it sounded angry, almost like a deep humming or moaning while yelling my name. It was loud enough that it woke me up immediately. I remember sitting up in bed and saying something like, "What? What did I do?" because I really thought I was in trouble. The next morning I asked them why they were screaming my name in the middle of the night. They looked completely confused. They both insisted that they had never called for me, and said that they had slept through the entire night. I argued with them because I knew what I had heard, but of course they never changed their story. When that happened, I texted my mom, even though we never really speak, and it's hard to get in contact with her, and told her what happened. Her response honestly shook me. She said there was something she called a mimic that had supposedly followed my grandmother for years. According to her, she experienced strange encounters growing up too, where she'd hear voices that sounded exactly like family members. I don't know much about mimics or paranormal beliefs, but hearing that gave me chills because it strangely fit what I'd experienced. Thinking back, there were other weird things involving my grandmother even before we moved. When my siblings and I lived in Massachusetts, there were multiple times we'd find my Nana just standing silently outside one of our bedroom doors. She wouldn't say anything. We'd open the door, she'd simply walk away to her room, and later she'd have no memory of doing it. We always thought it was odd, but never really questioned it. Fast forward a few months. I leave for college in Savannah, Georgia. Nothing major happened there, although I occasionally had little experiences that made me uneasy, but once again can just brush off. Then recently something happened that's been bothering me even more. I'm back in Massachusetts for the summer, and I was staying in my boyfriend's house. His house has always felt a little creepy to me, but I'd never really seen anything that my boyfriend has said. That night, I decided to sleep on the couch in his bedroom instead of in bed with him. Long story, I was being dramatic because I wanted more attention. At some point during the night, I woke up and saw what I thought was my boyfriend standing in the corner of the room by his bed, getting up to come save me from the couch. It looked exactly like him. The only difference was that it was completely dark, almost like a shadow. I couldn't make out any facial features or colors, but I recognized his shape and movements. I thought he was getting dressed like he normally does when he gets up from bed. I wasn't scared at first because I genuinely believed it was him. I even started reaching my hand out toward him because we have this little routine where I jokingly pretend I'm falling off the couch and he comes over, picks me up, kisses me, and we go back to bed together. Instead of coming toward me like I thought it was, this figure just started moving strangely, and after a while of trying to make sense of it before it clicked in my head. The best way I can describe it is dancing or making these unnatural movements that didn't make any sense. That's when I looked over. My actual boyfriend was still asleep in bed. The figure was not him. I froze and quietly started saying my boyfriend's name until he woke up. Once he realized how terrified I was, he started freaking out too, and brought me to bed with him. I remember telling him to stay quiet for some reason. I didn't want whatever I was seeing to know I was scared. Has anyone experienced anything similar? Any explanation or input? Okay, story number 4. Demons are real. At least, that's what I believe after something that happened to me years ago. by Digital Battle Ape. Demons are real. At least that's what I believe after something that happened to me years ago when I was around 19 or 20. Before I get into what actually happened, let me give you a little background. I'm an Indian Christian, and I come from a family that's quite religious, and I guess you could say a little more open to the spiritual side of Christianity. Most of my aunts and one of my uncles on my mother's side are pastors. They have their own ministries and are full-time pastors. And some of them, believe it or not, claim to have spiritual gifts. For example, I have an aunt who gets what she describes as visions or premonitions through dreams. I've personally witnessed a few things over the years that made me believe there might actually be something to it. Another aunt of mine, my mother's eldest sister, is a fairly well-known exorcist in her town, in Andhra Pradesh, a southern state in India. Now, here's where the story actually begins. At the time, I was living with my parents in Bangalore. My dad worked for the central government and had been transferred there, so we'd eventually settled in Bangalore, one of the metropolitan cities in India. The incident happened when I had gone to visit my relatives in a rural town in Andhra Pradesh. My aunt, the same aunt I mentioned earlier, the one who performs exorcisms, had been invited to the house of a mutual friend of my uncle. So my mom, dad, aunt, uncle, and I decided to go along. As far as I knew, it was just going to be a normal visit. It wasn't. When we got there, we were told that the family's youngest daughter, a little girl who was probably around 11 or 12, had been behaving very strangely. From what they were describing, they believed she was possessed by some kind of spirit or demon. My aunt doesn't automatically assume that every strange case is demonic possession. In fact, most of the cases she deals with turn out to be some kind of psychological or mental health explanation. So initially, she thought this was probably another one of those cases. But then she started praying for the girl. That's when things got really strange. The girl suddenly became extremely violent. There were 4 or 5 grown men trying to restrain her, and she was fighting them with a level of strength that honestly I found difficult to comprehend. She was a small 11 or 12-year-old girl, yet it took several grown men to hold her down. But that wasn't even what scared me the most. Throughout the entire ordeal, this girl kept looking at me, I mean really looking at me. She would scream, shout, curse at people, and thrash around, and then, suddenly, she'd stop and stare directly at me with this really sinister grin. It was one of the creepiest things I've ever experienced. It felt like she wasn't just looking at me, it felt like she was looking through me. And here's the thing. At that point in my life, I had a secret. I'd already lost my virginity to my girlfriend at the time, who was now my ex. We were sexually active, and we'd kept that completely private. Nobody in my family knew sex is a taboo topic in India. It's a bit ironic, considering us being the most populated country in the world. In fact, as far as I knew, nobody there knew anything about it except me and my girlfriend. And because I was a Christian, I felt extremely guilty about it. Sex before marriage was something I'd been taught was sinful, and I knew I'd crossed that line. So when this little girl kept staring at me like that, I started getting this horrible feeling that she somehow knew. I know how ridiculous that sounds, but then something happened that I still can't explain. It was toward the end of the whole ordeal. The girl looked straight at me again, and then she said my girlfriend's name, her actual name. I froze. For a second, I genuinely felt like my heart stopped. How could she possibly know? I'd never met this girl before. She lived hundreds of kilometers away. I'd never told anyone in my family about my relationship, and certainly not about the fact that we were having sex. Yet somehow she knew the name of a girl I was secretly sleeping with. And the way she said it made it even worse. It felt like she was deliberately taunting me, as if she knew exactly what I'd been doing and wanted me to know what she saw. I can't properly describe what I felt in that moment. Fear, embarrassment, confusion, all of it at once. Even now, years later, that moment still bothers me. I've tried to think of rational explanations for it. Maybe there was something I didn't know. Maybe somehow the information had reached her through someone else. Maybe there was another explanation entirely. But I genuinely don't know. All I know is what I experienced that day. And based on everything I witnessed, I believe that the girl was possessed. Not by the spirit of some dead person, I believe it was something else. Eventually, after another roughly 45 minutes, the girl passed out. Things finally calmed down and we left. A few months later, I heard that she had apparently recovered after her family spent a lot of time praying for her. I have no idea what ultimately happened to her after that, but that experience has stayed with me all these years, because no matter how many times I replay that day in my head, I still can't answer one simple question. How did that little girl know her name? There's just no freaking way. And story number 5 today is... My friend's house definitely has something weird going on, by Unlikely Relation 781. Back in February, I was staying at a friend's house. She was house-sitting before she actually moved in. Her house was built about 5 years ago, and before it was just an empty field. During the day, it was completely normal, and me and her had no problem. My other friend that was also over kept on saying that the house feels weird and has a strange vibe. I thought she was just overreacting, and so did my friend who owns the house. So me and my friend leave a little before sunset and go home. My friend who owns the house, Monica, had 2 of her other friends and family over to spend the night. From this point till the next day is from what they told me and not my direct experience. Monica and her friends were all downstairs at around 12 a.m. when Eileen, a friend, saw a man in the backyard. Monica called me multiple times and was texting me her house got broken into. I was asleep, so I didn't see till a few hours later that she texted. They all go upstairs and hear really strange noises. For example, a door opened. At this point, 911 is called because obviously someone is in the house. The cops arrive and do a full search of the house and the backyard and determine no one was there. Monica has cameras everywhere, so the cops ask if she could review the camera footage as well. Nothing showed up in the camera. The cops leave, and Monica and her friends go back upstairs after closing the door and window that popped open. The next morning, Eileen and the others leave, which left Monica alone, so she called me first thing and I go over. She shows me where everything happened. Remember, the cops said they did a full search. Monica showed me that the garage door was locked from the inside, which there's no way, given the layout of the house, that it was locked from the inside, meaning the cops couldn't get into the garage. Anyways, I stay the whole day and nothing happens. Later that night, we were chilling on the couch, and that's when we hear 2 loud, distinct knocks on the back door. We were sitting on the couch that was like 2 feet from the door. We instantly freeze. I have never frozen in fear before. We look at each other and we instantly decide to go upstairs. We're looking at the cameras and outside, and no one is there. While we were upstairs, there was weird shuffling noises near the back walls. We weren't going to call the cops again because they'd already deemed the house safe. Anyways, fast forward to a few days ago. Eileen, Monica's friend, tells me how she actually never saw a man and that she actually just saw a shadow, or really didn't see anything. She also paused and said she's trying to convince herself it wasn't real, which I thought was dramatic. So why would the door and window have opened? What the hell were those noises? There was no weather event happening, and it was a regular temperature outside, 75 Fahrenheit. Side note, I'm sure there is a much better way to tell this story. I just have no sense of sentence structure. Okay, you dead fine. You behave yourself. You dead fine. Also, they haven't figured out how the garage door was locked and jammed. I mean, if you're looking for rational explanations, wind currents in houses can do all sorts of weird things, depending on how old the house is. Oftentimes people will pass that off as paranormal activity when it's just things going. As far as how the lock jammed, faulty lock, maybe, yeah, I mean, probably just a faulty lock, really. Yeah, but that's the rational explanation. Or there could be spooks, but if nothing's happened before or since, I'd honestly just put it down to freak random occurrences, which can happen. And that brings us to the end of today's video. Big thanks to everyone who allowed me to use their stories. If you'd like to support the channel, you can sign up for my Patreon page, which is linked in the description, as little as $1 or more, whatever you're comfortable with, every month, or until you stop. Get your early access to all the videos at once on Monday. There's also a link to my merchandise store over on Teespring, as well as my Discord server, that's just for funsies, and my Threads account, which I really should update at some point. Maybe I should just link my Instagram. I don't really update that either, but I do use it more. Oh, and my email is kingofthecities@gmail.com. If you need to contact me, either sending in a story, you want a shout out, or you have some sort of business related inquiry. That last one has never actually worked out so far, but you never know. And with that, I'm going to head off for now. So until next time, thank you very much for watching, and take very good care of yourselves. Bye bye.